Good morning, you are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanov, and here are the top stories. U.S. President Donald Trump starts Ukraine talks, announcing first meeting with Vladimir Putin to take place in Saudi Arabia. UN official warns humanitarian crisis deepens in eastern Congo amid security, looting and funding challenges. Toyota and Mitsubishi ban employees from using Chinese application DeepSeek. U.S. President Donald Trump held separate phone calls with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, discussing efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Trump later said that both leaders want peace. Ubi Shbander from Washington, D.C. has more on that.
President Trump announced on Wednesday that he has reached an agreement with Russian President Vladimir Putin to immediately begin negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will lead the American negotiating team. Witkoff met with Putin earlier this week, following the release of an American citizen who was being held by the Russians for the past 3 years. President Trump also spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky shortly after his Putin call. President Trump posted on Truth Social that he discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy policy, and the power of the dollar, amongst other topics, with President Putin. He posted on social media that, quote, "We both reflected on the great history of our nations, and we both agreed that we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia and Ukraine. No more lives should be lost." Those were President Trump's words. President Trump's announcement signals a major step by Washington towards ending the war. It comes on the heels of a speech by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in Brussels, where he told European allies that NATO membership for Ukraine is off the table and that Europe must spend much more on its own defense and national security. Amubi Shabander reporting for A News, Washington, D.C.
U.S. President Donald Trump is planning to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin with hopes of ending the nearly 3-year war in Ukraine. The potential talks have sparked reactions from European leaders who emphasize the importance of including Ukraine in any peace negotiations.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he anticipates meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin probably in Saudi Arabia. He says this could be the first in a series of discussions aimed at resolving the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. Trump called the war a disaster, saying his involvement could help bring an end to the conflict, which has lasted nearly 3 years.
We'll get something done. We're going to be meeting, actually tomorrow they're meeting in Munich, as you know, and we're going to have some other meetings, and I'll be dealing with President Putin largely on the phone, and we ultimately expect to meet. In fact, we expect that he'll come here and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia. The first time we'll meet in Saudi Arabia, see if we can get something done. But we want to end that war. That war is a disaster. It's a really bloody, horrible war.
Top European diplomats warn that high-stakes negotiations that could decide the future of Eastern Europe must include Ukraine. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock told Politico, peace can only be achieved together. And that means with Ukraine and with the Europeans. She added that they must take this path together so that peace returns to Europe. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, reacting to Trump on social media X, saying, all we need is peace, a just peace. Ukraine, Europe and the United States should work on this together. The United Nations reacted to the phone call between the US and Russian leaders as a positive move. UN Deputy Spokesman Farhan Haq says that the organization welcomes all efforts to resolve the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
European powers, including Britain, France and Germany, insist on being part of any future negotiations on Ukraine's fate. European foreign ministers met in Paris ahead of a security conference in Munich this weekend. The announcement follows U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's statement that restoring Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is unrealistic, and the NATO membership for Kiev is not seen as part of a solution to the war. It also comes after phone calls between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, as well as Trump's call to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Senators in Washington, D.C. have cited strategic concerns from Russia and China as a case for the U.S. acquiring Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory under the Kingdom of Denmark. While Russia maintains military assets in the Arctic, China has been investing heavily, raising concerns among U.S. lawmakers. The country's strategic location and untapped mineral resources have also drawn interest. However, according to a survey, 85% of Greenlanders oppose U.S. control, and all parliamentary parties reject the idea. The rise of right and far-right parties in Europe is reshaping the continent's political landscape, from economic anxieties to shifting social values. In the following report, we examine what's fueling their resurgence and what could it bring for the future of the EU.
As Western nations enter another election cycle in 2025, the most striking development compared to previous elections is the growing strength of far-right politicians. The European Parliament elections saw far-right parties secure their highest ever vote share, winning nearly a quarter of the seats and achieving significant successes in major countries such as France, Germany, and Italy. This trend extended beyond the European Parliament, influencing local and presidential elections in Germany, Austria, and Romania. The far-right's victory in local elections in Germany in 2023 marked the beginning of a broader surge across Europe. A look at Europe's political map highlights Italy, Sweden, Finland, Hungary, Germany, France, and the Netherlands as key centers of this shift. Far-right parties in these countries have rapidly gained public support, driven by more than just anti-immigrant policies or opposition to social norms. Their appeal is rooted in deeper economic, social, and cultural dynamics. One of the key drivers behind the far-right's rise is Europe's ongoing economic crisis and widening inequalities. Many voters feel that their concerns over job insecurity, rising living costs, and economic instability have been ignored by centrist and left-wing politicians. Far-right parties have capitalized on this by linking economic hardship to immigration, presenting national identity as a solution to financial struggles. Anti-immigrant sentiment remains a core pillar of populist movements, with far-right leaders amplifying the claim that migrants negatively impact national economies. Another factor fueling the far-right's rise is shifting attitudes towards gender issues. Right-wing parties have attracted more male than female voters by advocating for a return to traditional social structures. This appeal to family values has led to a resurgence of populist narratives around gender roles, with criticisms of women's rights and gender equality aligning with far-right rhetoric. Notably, far-right parties have gained traction among young voters, particularly first-time male voters. In Poland's 2023 election, nearly half of men aged 18 to 21 backed a far-right party, and a similar trend was observed in Portugal's March 2024 election, where 1 in 4 voters under 25 supported the far-right Chega party.
The problem that we're facing in Europe is that there is a growing disavowalment, disconnection between the ruling elites that are no longer elites or just a political class, that has lesser and lesser quality and a lesser and lesser capacity of management, with crises popping up left, right, and center all over Europe, be it. So, of course, immigration comes in, but immigration oftentimes doesn't integrate, and those that integrate are not noticed. Only those that are noticeable are the ones that don't integrate. Look at the problems of security that are arising in Sweden. And, of course, that is making the far right in Sweden grow, as well as in Finland and in so many other countries. Unfortunately, the only way to do this is to have a stronger political class, stronger institutions, and an awareness in the media and in education to be able to teach people what the consequences of extremism are and where this can lead.
In Germany, 2024 surveys indicated rising support for the far-right alternative for Deutschland among young men. Data from the Pew Research Center revealed that 26% of German men viewed the AfD favorably, compared to just 11% of women. This marked a 10-point increase since 2022, with youth unemployment and economic uncertainty seen as major contributors. AfD's vote share among under-24s increased by 11% compared to 2019, reflecting wider discontent. The rise of the far right is deepening ideological divisions in Europe. Prominent figures driving right-wing populism include Italy's Giorgia Meloni, France's Marine Le Pen, Hungary's Viktor Orban, the Netherlands' Geert Wilders, and Poland's Jarosław Kaczynski. Their influence mirrors the populist right movement in the United States, led by Donald Trump, whose America First stance aligns with Europe's nationalist rhetoric of our people first. Both movements reject establishment politics and thrive on public discontent.
If we do not protect the system, what we are going to see is the parties are going to be questioned after the politicians, then it's going to be the institutions, government first, then the legislative, then the judicial, and then finally it's going to be the system. So people are going to be asking for authoritarian governments to fix the problems that democracies were not able to fix. And this is the beginning of the end.
The far right's growing influence poses challenges to the EU's political stability and core democratic values. Since its foundation, the EU has been built on human rights, democratic governance, and international cooperation. However, far-right parties increasingly view Brussels and EU institutions as adversaries, raising concerns about European unity. At the same time, criticism of the EU is not exclusive to the far right. Some left-wing movements also argue that EU bureaucracy undermines national decision-making, calling for reforms to improve transparency and accountability. If far-right continues to gain ground, the EU could face internal divisions that challenge its long-term cohesion.
Egypt and Qatar are intensifying diplomatic efforts to salvage the Gaza ceasefire agreement, ahead of the Saturday deadline set by Israel's Prime Minister. Benjamin Netanyahu said that if Hamas doesn't release hostages, the fighting will resume. Giles Gibson reports from Tel Aviv.
Behind the scenes, mediators between Israel and Hamas are working very hard to try to get this ceasefire back on track. According to reports, both Qatar and Egypt working intensively to try to bridge the gap between Israel and Hamas. Of course, one of the other key mediators in this entire peace process is the US. And US President Donald Trump, during a meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah at the White House on Tuesday, said that he doesn't think that Hamas are going to make the deadline in terms of handing over hostages by Saturday, also accusing the group of playing tough guy. There is also some room for interpretation, some room for maneuver in the message that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, sent to Hamas late on Tuesday, local time here in Israel. The words that he used were that Hamas should return our hostages by Saturday noon. There's a lot of focus on that word "our" in that sentence. Is he saying that he backs up US President Donald Trump's suggestion that all of the remaining Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza should be released on Saturday? Or would it be enough, just 3 hostages, as was initially planned, to keep the ceasefire deal alive and to keep phase 1 still going? In terms of Hamas's response, well, they have said that they remain committed to the ceasefire agreement. And remember, initially they said, when they announced that they were delaying this planned hostage release on Saturday, they said that they were doing so because they believe that Israel is violating the terms of the deal, in particular delaying the return of Palestinians to the northern part of Gaza, as well as delaying the influx of humanitarian aid into the enclave. Those are 2 allegations that the Israelis strongly deny, but that is really the area where experts believe there could be some sort of a deal, that Israel could make assurances around the influx of humanitarian aid and the movement of Palestinians around the enclave in order for Hamas to release hostages on Saturday and keep this deal alive. Giles Gibson for A News, Tel Aviv.
Over to the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo now. Continued violence has displaced more than 1,100,000 people in Goma. It's after the M23 rebels took control of the capital city. Because of this, and together with U.S. funding being stopped, relief efforts are disrupted.
Widespread security issues, looting of supplies, the closure of Goma airport and a cut in funding have meant the humanitarian crisis in eastern Congo has worsened, and it's now severely disrupting relief efforts. That's according to the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. It's despite leaders calling for a ceasefire. The M23 rebels are advancing on Bukavu. They already took control of Goma, displacing more than 110,000 people. Around 1 million are already displaced since 2022. The United Nations says eastern Congo relies heavily on US aid, and funding cuts have already stopped several projects.
Out of the $1.3 billion in humanitarian aid, $910 million came from the US, meaning we are 70% dependent on it. This makes Congo the most aid-dependent country in the world, and replacing that funding will be extremely difficult. The consequences are already being felt, as several partners have had to pause their projects.
The M23, a rebel group formed in 2012 with mainly ethnic Tutsi fighters, emerged after a peace agreement they claimed was violated. Since then, they have launched violent campaigns in eastern Congo. After resurfacing in 2021, the group advanced into South Kivu in early 2025, capturing Goma and declaring their own administration. Backed by Rwanda, the M23 claims to be fighting for the rights of ethnic Tutsis, while the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo argues that the group seeks control of the region's valuable mineral resources.
Wildfires in Chile's Araucanía region have left 1 person dead and over 40 homeless. Authorities warn the situation remains critical.
Flames tore through Chile's central Araucanía region, turning forests into ashes. The wildfires have already killed 1 person, destroyed 30 homes, and displaced dozens. That's according to the National Service for Disaster Prevention and Response. Authorities remain on high alert and are closely monitoring the situation. Fire crews are helping to evacuate 860,000 people to safety. Helicopters are dropping water over the affected areas, and tractors dig fire breaks to slow the blaze, as thick smoke billows across the landscape.
According to information provided by the National Forestry Corporation, we are fighting 8 fires. Since yesterday, the situation has become more critical, and the fire has advanced from the Galvarino sector and has reached the municipality of Traihien.
The crisis follows last year's wildfires in the Valparaiso region, which killed at least 136 people and destroyed more than 6,600 homes.
Vietnam's capital, Hanoi, has been ranked the world's most polluted city by the Air Quality Index. Thick smog is sparking growing concerns among both residents and visitors.
Globally, every year, air pollution causes around 7 million deaths per year. In the capital, Vietnam, there's at least 70,000 people who die each year from toxic air, according to the United Nations' latest figures. Hanoi has been ranked as the most polluted city in the world, according to the Air Quality Index. There are increasing concerns from residents and tourists who are frustrated over the city's persistently hazardous blanket of smog.
There are days when the level of pollution is sky high. It's not that the sky is gloomy, but it's covered in a blanket of dust and fog. My job takes me mostly to places like the forests and oceans, so I don't stay much in Hanoi. But when I do, it's extremely uncomfortable. Even though this area has a lake, lots of green trees, and less traffic.
Visitors wear face masks full time to avoid inhaling the dirty air.
If I have to stay in Hanoi for a while, its polluted air would damage my health. I have to wear a face mask every time. The air is severely polluted because of the sheer number of motor vehicles on the road. There are just too many of them.
The country is committed to reaching zero carbon emissions by 2050 and has joined the World Health Organization's Alliance for Action on Climate Change and Health. However, with nearly 9 million people who live in the country, with more than 8 million registered vehicles, there are calls for the country to do more to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels and move towards cleaner vehicles. There are also calls to reduce the burning of crops and rubbish outdoors.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has arrived in Pakistan. Islamabad describes the visit as an opportunity to further strengthen the brotherly ties and expand multifaceted cooperation between the two nations. The Turkish president arrived late Wednesday at Nur Khan Air Base, where President Asif Ali Zardari and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif warmly received him. Erdogan is scheduled to hold a bilateral meeting with Sharif and participate in the 7th meeting of the high-level Strategic Cooperation Council between Turkey and Pakistan. He will also attend the Turkey-Pakistan Business Forum and meet with Zardari. The trial of Ruben Vardanyan in Azerbaijan is drawing international attention as he faces serious charges linked to terrorism and war crimes. Ukrainian lawmakers highlighted his alleged ties to the Kremlin.
The trial against Ruben Vardanyan, an Armenian citizen accused of torture, mercenary activities, war crimes, terrorism, and financing terrorism, is underway in Azerbaijan. He is alleged to have funded and organized illegal armed groups in Karabakh. Vardanyan's controversial background extends beyond these charges. The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project exposed his role in moving billions through offshore accounts via his company, Troika Dialogue, benefiting Russian oligarchs and state-linked entities. He renounced his Russian citizenship in 2022 to evade Western sanctions, but was sanctioned by Ukraine for supporting the Russian occupation army. His trial in Azerbaijan has reignited discussions among Ukrainian lawmakers about his international criminal activities. Yuri Kamelchuk, an MP from the Servant of the People Party, states in videos on his personal accounts that Vardanyan is completely discredited.
If he weren't in custody in Azerbaijan, he should be delivered to Ukraine or Lithuania, for example. By the way, the Mirot Fore's website states, subject to immediate detention and transfer to law enforcement agencies of Ukraine or NATO countries.
Mykola Halushko, Kamelchuk's party colleague, wrote on Facebook that Ruben Vardanyan is twice an enemy of Ukraine and Putin's Russian puppet and wallet. Halushko was supported by his colleague Alexander Fedienko, who highlighted Vardanyan's close ties with Putin.
Цей діяч, відомий достатньо величезною своєю близькістю до Путіна, став символом.
Vardanyan is a figure known for his closeness to Putin, who became a symbol of financial support for Russian aggression. Since 2019, his name has appeared in investigations and sanctions lists of the USA, EU and Ukraine.
Tatiana Grishenko, who is also a member of Ukrainian parliament, in her Facebook post emphasized that she hopes the Azerbaijani court will put an end to his career as a hero of the Kremlin's fakes. Ukraine, the USA, the EU have already imposed sanctions against him. Ruben Vardanyan relocated to Karabakh in 2022, assuming the role of state minister in the so-called unrecognized, self-proclaimed Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. Vardanyan's arrest on September 27, 2023, marked a turning point. Azerbaijani forces detained him while he attempted to cross into Armenia, citing substantial evidence of his involvement in terrorism and other crimes.
Japanese automakers Toyota and Mitsubishi have banned their employees from using the Chinese artificial intelligence chatbot DeepSeek. Officials say it's over widening concerns among Japanese companies over the technology's data security, as well as Toyota, Mitsubishi Heavy, a key Japanese defense firm, and SoftBank, a major telecom company, have also restricted its use. DeepSeek has faced growing restrictions domestically and abroad due to concerns over data storage on Chinese servers and its subjection to Chinese laws. We are done for now, but don't go far. Stay tuned for more and have a wonderful morning.